Hello, my name is Mr. Harry and I was fired publicly by my own SONINLAW on the anniversary of the company. But what hurt even more was the mockery seeing my name on the screen, as if I was the one being dismissed. I thought I was done, forgotten, but what they didn't know was I wasn't going to let them get away with it. You won't believe the shocking truth behind my family's betrayal. And the wild twist I'm about to reveal. Stay tuned, because this fight is far from over. The air in the room buzzed with excitement. People were laughing, glasses clinking, and the soft hum of conversations filled the space. The anniversary of the company was supposed to be a celebration, a moment to honor years of hard work, sacrifice, and dedication. But for me, it felt like an almost suffocating reminder of the distance between me and my family. I stood at the back of the room, leaning against the wall, nursing a drink I hadn't touched. It wasn't the first time I felt this way, like I was watching my life from the outside. You'd think after decades of work, decades of building this business with my own hands, I would feel more like I belonged. But tonight, it felt different. It felt like I was invisible, standing among the people I had helped raise up but now couldn't seem to connect with. I watched them, my family, the people I had poured everything into. My daughter, smiling and laughing with Malcolm, her husband, the new CEO. He was the one everyone was focused on now. I was just a shadow, a name in the background. The space between us had grown wider, and no one seemed to notice or care. My mind wandered. I remembered the first days when I helped put this place together, when I was the one everyone looked up to. But now, I was the old man who no one had time for. It hurt. It didn't make sense. But I kept my eyes on Malcolm, the man who had taken over everything, from my daughter's heart to this company. He was standing at the podium now, ready to say something. I tried to smile. I had to, for appearances. But deep down, I felt it. That familiar ache. The resentment was starting to rise. "Thank you all for being here," Malcolm said, his voice smooth and commanding. "Tonight is about looking ahead. We're going in a new direction, a direction that will keep us on the cutting edge." I stayed still, pretending to be a part of this celebration, pretending that everything was fine. But then, Malcolm's eyes met mine. He hesitated for a moment. The room fell quiet. And then it happened. "Before we get into the festivities," Malcolm continued, his voice dropping into something colder, more calculated, "I think it's time to officially announce the change we've all been waiting for." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Mr. Harry, the founder of this company, has been an invaluable part of our journey," he said. "But as of today, we need new leadership." The room seemed to freeze. Every inch of me stiffened as the weight of what he was saying crashed down on me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened. The anger boiled up from somewhere deep inside, but I held it in. Malcolm's words echoed in my ears. "His presence here is no longer needed." The room went silent. My heart pounded in my chest, but I could hear my own thoughts. They were mocking me. They were telling me I was nothing. The laughter started, soft at first, then louder. A few people chuckled, and some of my family members looked away, their faces full of awkwardness. But the pain of it all, it crushed me. To be fired by your own son-in-law, in front of your family, at your own company's anniversary, it was nothing short of humiliation. I looked up at the screen behind Malcolm. There it was, my name. Employee of the Year. It flashed. But the words felt empty, hollow. They weren't a tribute. They were a joke. The crowd continued to laugh, and I could hear the snickers now. It wasn't just Malcolm. It was everyone. The worst part? My daughter stood there beside him, her arms crossed. She didn't say a word. She didn't step forward to stop him. She just stood there, silent. Her silence pierced through me like a knife. I looked back at the screen, my eyes stinging. The weight of everything I had built, all the years of sacrifice, felt like it was evaporating before my eyes. This wasn't just a firing. It was betrayal. A mockery of everything I had done for them. It felt like the ground was pulled out from under me. But there was something else. Something that cut even deeper. It wasn't the words they said, or the way they laughed. It was that, in that moment, I realized just how far I had fallen, how they had pushed me aside. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally seeing the truth. I had given them everything, and they had given me nothing. They had taken it all, and now they were treating me like I didn't matter anymore. A thought crossed my mind, a dangerous thought. What if this wasn't the end? What if this was just the beginning? The crowd's laughter continued, but I stood there, my hands shaking. I had been humiliated, yes, but I was no longer going to be their punching bag. I was done, and just like that, a new resolve began to form inside me. The rage was still there, but now it was tempered with something else, something stronger. I wasn't going to let them keep taking from me. My gaze drifted to my daughter again. She had been the one thing I still held on to, but now, she wasn't there for me. And that was the moment I realized I had been loyal to them for too long. It was time to stop. I took one last look at the screen. My name was still up there, a symbol of everything I had built. But it wasn't me anymore. It wasn't the man I had been. As the laughter slowly died down, I made a decision. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The door clicked shut behind me as I left the anniversary event. The celebration was still alive and loud inside, but the noise felt distant now, as if it were happening in someone else's world. Outside, the cool air hit me, and for a moment, I stood there on the sidewalk, unsure of where to go next. My body felt numb, like I had just been through something I couldn't fully grasp. I had been humiliated, fired, publicly, and the worst part, I hadn't even seen it coming. Anger churned in my chest, but I kept it down. I wasn't going to let it show. Not yet. It wasn't just Malcolm who had done this to me. It was everyone. My own daughter, standing beside him, her silence louder than any words could have been. I had built this company from the ground up, and now they were casting me aside like an old tool, no longer useful. The thought burned inside me, but I stayed calm. I wasn't going to make a scene. I spent the next day in isolation, locked away in my own house. The house I had built with my own two hands, where I thought I was supposed to feel safe and at home. But now, it felt cold, empty. My wife, who had always been my quiet support, didn't even try to comfort me. She avoided my gaze as I walked through the house, and I could feel the distance between us widening. The silence in the room was thick, more oppressive than anything Malcolm had said to me. I wanted her to say something, to show me that she cared. But all she did was sit in silence, her eyes glued to the floor. Betrayal. That's what it felt like. Not just from Malcolm, but from my own family. I had spent decades putting my blood, sweat, and tears into building this business, making sure they were all taken care of. And now, I was nothing more than a relic, a forgotten memory. The legacy I had worked so hard to create was slipping through my fingers like sand. I couldn't stay in the house all day. I had to do something, anything to take my mind off the shame that hung around me like a cloud. So, I went for a walk, trying to clear my head. As I walked, my mind wandered back to the early days of the company, the long nights we spent together, building something out of nothing. Those were the days when I was respected, when I was a part of something real. Now, all I had was the memory of what used to be. I remembered the days when my mentor had told me, "Don't let family become more important than your own self-respect." At the time, I thought I understood what he meant, but I chose to ignore it. I believed loyalty was everything. I put my family above all else, above myself. Now, I wondered if I had made the right choice. The thought gnawed at me. Had my loyalty blinded me? Had I given everything for them, only to be discarded when I no longer served a purpose? That night, I went to see my daughter. I needed to hear something, anything, that would help me make sense of what had happened. But when I arrived at her house, the look on her face told me everything I needed to know. She was caught between loyalty to her husband and to me, and she didn't know how to navigate that. She was silent, too silent. It was as though she couldn't even look at me. "Why didn't you say something?" I asked, my voice a little sharper than I intended. She looked down at the floor, avoiding my eyes. I don't know, Dad," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know what to do anymore." That silence hurt more than anything. I wasn't just being ignored, I was being erased. I stood there for a moment, staring at her, searching for some sign of the daughter I used to know, the one who would have stood up for me, but she didn't. And that was the moment I realized that I had been sidelined. Not just by Malcolm, but by my own flesh and blood. I didn't say anything else. I just walked out, the weight of the world on my shoulders. Later that night, as I sat alone in my office, I opened a letter from the company's legal team. It was a severance agreement, final and signed. But as I scanned the document, something caught my eye. It wasn't just a routine separation. This had been planned. They had been preparing this move for months, and I had been too blind to see it. The anger surged again, but this time, it wasn't just the sting of betrayal. It was the realization that I had been set up. The firing wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated decision, part of some larger plan I didn't know about. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. I wasn't just a victim. I was being made a fool of, and I wouldn't stand for it. The next day, I reached out to a few old friends. Men I had worked with in the past, people who knew me before everything changed. They listened, and they sympathized. But they couldn't do anything for me. They had moved on. Their lives were different now. They were all too far removed from the business to help me reclaim what was mine. But there was one thing I could do. One thing I could still control. I called a lawyer. The conversation was brief, but eye-opening. The lawyer told me that what had happened wasn't just morally wrong. It might also be illegal. I wasn't just going to sit back and let them take everything from me. I had a path forward. It wasn't easy, but I had options. I wasn't the man they thought I was. I wasn't just some old fool who could be tossed aside, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Over the next few days, I started putting a plan together. I wasn't going to confront Malcolm directly, not yet. I needed to play the long game. I began collecting evidence, talking to people in the company, and doing what I could to make sure my presence was still felt. Then, one day, I found something. A key piece of information. Something that could bring Malcolm down. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. I felt the tension building. This wasn't just about getting my job back. It was about reclaiming my dignity, reclaiming everything they had taken from me. As I stood at the threshold of action, I knew this was just the beginning. The next steps would change everything. The battle had begun. I woke up the next morning with the same heaviness that had dragged me down the day before. It was the kind of weight that sticks with you, That gnawing feeling in the pit of your stomach that won't let go, no matter how much you try to shake it off. The events from the night before still felt like they were echoing in my mind. The firing, the humiliation, the shock of it all. But more than that, it was the sting of knowing that everything I had worked for was being dismissed as if it never mattered. I didn't leave the house. I didn't feel like being around anyone, not even my wife, who was still trying to act like everything was fine. But I saw it in her eyes, the same silence, the same avoidance. She didn't know what to say to me, and I wasn't sure I wanted to hear whatever words she might offer. Words like, "It'll be okay," or "We'll figure it out." They didn't mean a thing now. I sat in my study, staring at the documents on my desk. Legal paperwork, severance agreements. All the fine print I had learned to ignore in the past because I trusted my family, trusted the company I built with my own hands. But now, all I had were these papers, staring back at me like a cold reminder of the betrayal. I forced myself to go over every line, every clause. And that's when I saw it. A mistake. A glaring error in the way they had handled my firing. They didn't follow proper procedure. This wasn't just some oversight. This was a calculated move, a deliberate misstep. It hit me all at once. The anger, which had been simmering below the surface, now bubbled to the top. I wasn't just a victim of bad luck or some miscommunication. No. This was their plan, all along. They wanted me gone, and they thought I was just going to accept it. But I wasn't going to roll over. Not this time. I'd fought for my family, for this business, for years. And now I was going to fight for myself. I leaned back in my chair, my hands clenched. It wasn't about pride anymore. It wasn't even about getting my job back. It was about standing up for what I had built, for what I had sacrificed. I'd spent so many years being the strong one, the silent one, the one who made sure everyone else was taken care of, while I put my own needs aside. But no more. It was time to take back control. I wasn't rushing into anything. This wasn't some rash decision driven by anger. I was thinking ahead, planning, strategizing. I wasn't just going to lash out at Malcolm and the family in some emotional outburst. No. I was going to make them regret underestimating me. I reached out to a few old friends, people who had worked with me back in the day. When things were different, they were surprised to hear from me, but they still respected me. I could feel their sympathy through the phone, but sympathy wasn't what I needed. I needed strength. I needed to remind myself of who I was before all of this. Before Malcolm. Before the firing. One of them said something that stuck with me. "You've always had a way of turning things around, Harry. It's time to use that wit you've got left." Those words hit me like a punch in the chest. For the first time since the firing, I felt a spark of my old self. The man who had commanded respect without having to ask for it. The man who didn't take any crap from anyone, not even family. The man who built this business from nothing. That man was still in me, and it was time for him to come out. I spent the next few days getting to work. I wasn't rushing in like a bull in a china shop. I was being strategic, methodical. I started making calls, talking to people, getting my story out there. I didn't need anyone's sympathy. I just needed people to understand the truth. The quiet power that comes with age began to surface in me. I wasn't looking for approval anymore. I wasn't chasing anyone's approval. I was looking for acknowledgement. Acknowledgement for the years I had spent working for this company, for the blood, sweat, and tears I had put into it, and I wasn't going to let anyone forget it. Then came the breakthrough. I learned through a trusted ally that Malcolm's personal dealings had been questionable for some time. That was the leverage I needed. Malcolm had his own skeletons in the closet, and if he thought he could ruin me without repercussions, he was gravely mistaken. I spent the next few weeks gathering everything I could on Malcolm's financial dealings. Emails, phone calls, meetings, anything that could be used to expose him for what he was. I wasn't going to confront him directly. Not yet. I had to be patient. I was playing the long game. But I was setting the stage for something big, something that would turn the tables in my favor. Then, just when I thought I was making progress, I received a call from my lawyer. We had gone over the details of my firing, the missteps in their handling of it. But now, there was something new. A clause in my original employment contract. If invoked, it would give me a significant amount of leverage in my dispute with the company. It was like a shot of adrenaline. I had something real now, something that could turn the entire situation around. I wasn't just a man who had been wronged. I was a man with the legal right to fight back. But I didn't rush into anything. Patience was key. I knew that. I wasn't going to make a move until I had everything lined up perfectly. The timing had to be just right. As the days passed, I could feel the storm coming. It was building up inside me, and I knew that soon I'd be ready to unleash it. But for now, I was waiting, quietly preparing. I had all the pieces in place. Now, it was time to put them together. I sat there that night, staring at the stack of papers in front of me. My heart raced with anticipation. The next steps would be crucial. I wasn't just fighting for a job. I was fighting for everything I had ever built, everything I had ever believed in. This was the moment of truth. Then, my phone rang. It was my daughter. She told me she had seen the signs. She was starting to see through Malcolm's facade. She knew something wasn't right, and for the first time, she was questioning his integrity. It was a small victory, but it was enough to give me a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't fighting this battle alone. The days had passed slowly, each one more suffocating than the last. I could feel the pressure mounting as the confrontation with Malcolm drew nearer. There was a sharp edge to everything now, a bitterness that lingered, eating away at the calm exterior I'd been holding on to for the past few weeks. The public firing had shattered something deep inside me, but now I had something to hold on to. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I had a plan, and I was ready to make them feel the weight of what they'd done. I stood at the edge of my driveway, staring at the car in front of me. The windshield was fogged with the early morning mist, but I could see my reflection in the glass. For a moment, I didn't recognize myself. The man in that reflection was older, sharper, determined. The years of sacrifice, the endless hours spent building this company, it was all rushing back to me. But today, none of that would matter unless I did something. It was time to make my move. I got in the car, my hands steady on the wheel, my mind calculating each step. The company was waiting for me, for the showdown. Malcolm had his boardroom, his legal team. But I had the truth, and that was something no one could take away. As I drove toward the office, the distance between me and everything I had built seemed to grow wider. But I wasn't backing down. I got a call just as I was parking. My daughter's name flashed across the screen. I hesitated, but I picked up. "Dad, I need you to think about this." Her voice was small, uncertain. "Malcolm is. He's asking you to reconsider. Maybe you could talk to him privately. For the family's sake." I didn't respond immediately. There was a knot in my stomach. Her words were like a betrayal, a reminder of how far apart we'd grown. I wanted to scream at her, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I took a breath. "I'll think about it, baby," I said, my voice cold, trying to sound calm. I hung up, the weight of her silence heavier than any words Malcolm could ever say. I made my way into the building, each step taking me closer to the moment that would change everything. The lobby felt the same, cold, sterile, impersonal. The place that had once felt like home now felt foreign to me, like I no longer belonged. I walked past the receptionist, who greeted me with a forced smile. She probably heard the whispers about me, saw the change in my status. I didn't bother acknowledging her. I wasn't here for pleasantries. I was here to make them hear me. As I sat in the waiting room, I could feel the eyes of the employees on me. Whispers filled the air, like I wasn't even human anymore. I overheard two of the junior employees chatting, their voices carrying in the quiet room. "I hear Malcolm's new management style is really making a difference," one said, her tone full of praise. "It's kind of a shame about Mr. Harry, though. He did so much for the company." The words stung like salt in a wound. They didn't get it. None of them did. They didn't understand what it took to build this company from the ground up, to make it what it was. They were too busy patting themselves on the back for the changes they thought were so revolutionary, but none of them had put in the years, the sacrifice. None of them knew what it meant to give everything for something bigger than themselves. I clenched my fists, but I kept my face neutral. I wasn't going to let them see me crack. Not now. Not when everything I had was on the line. The door to the boardroom opened, and I was ushered inside. The table was set. Malcolm sat at the head, his smug expression barely hiding his satisfaction. He probably thought this was over, that he'd won. But today, I wasn't here to lose. I walked in slowly, deliberately, and took my seat at the opposite end of the table. The air in the room felt thick with tension, and I could feel the eyes of the board members on me. They were waiting for me to speak, to beg for my job back. But I wasn't going to beg. Malcolm didn't waste time. He leaned forward, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Harry, I don't think there's much to discuss here. We've already made our decision. It's clear that the company needs new leadership, and I'm the one to take it forward." His words hit me like a slap, but I didn't react. I kept my voice steady. "You think you're the only one who can lead this company? You think you're the only one who knows what it takes? You've got no respect for what came before you, Malcolm. You don't get to rewrite history." The boardroom went silent. For the first time, they weren't sure what to expect. I wasn't the man they thought I was, the quiet, obedient elder who would just accept his fate. No, I had something now. I had something they didn't see coming. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the legal documents. The emails, the witnesses, evidence that would show the truth. "This firing wasn't legal, Malcolm," I said, my voice cold. "You didn't follow procedure. You didn't even have the decency to treat me like a human being." Malcolm's expression faltered for a second, but he quickly recovered. "We did what we had to do," he replied, trying to regain control. But I could see it, the crack in his armor. I leaned in, my voice low but firm. "No, you didn't. You did what was easiest for you, and now you'll pay for it." As I laid out the details of their misconduct, I could see the board members squirming. They didn't know what to do. They were trapped between their loyalty to Malcolm and the reality of what they had just heard. Some of them were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. One even started to speak up, trying to defend Malcolm, but I wasn't having it. "You can try to turn this around," I said, cutting him off. "But we both know you're not going to. You're trying to cover up the fact that Malcolm's been hiding things, personal deals, shady business. I've got the evidence." The room went dead silent. The truth was out there now. Malcolm's smug attitude evaporated, replaced with a nervous tension that he couldn't hide. The conversation shifted. The board members were starting to murmur, looking at each other, unsure of how to proceed. One of them stood up, trying to salvage the situation. "But Harry," he said, his voice shaky, "there have been concerns about your actions over the years. They've been inconsistent with the company's goals. That hit me like a ton of bricks. They were trying to make me the villain now. They were twisting everything. But I wasn't going to let them. Not this time. They're misinterpreting my actions, I replied, my voice sharp. This is about power, plain and simple. You're trying to justify what you did because you're scared, but I won't be your scapegoat. The tension in the room was suffocating. I could see the fear in some of their eyes, but I wasn't letting up. This was my moment, and I wasn't about to let it slip through my fingers. Just as it seemed like the board was about to reach a decision, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. Two of the board members were whispering about the fallout from firing Malcolm. They hinted at shady dealings, things that could ruin him. This was the leverage I needed. I held back a smile. I wasn't just fighting for my dignity anymore. This was bigger. I was fighting for the truth. I was going to expose the corruption at the heart of this company. The meeting ended with no decision. They were still trying to figure out how to spin it, but they knew they had been put on notice. As I walked out of the room, I knew this was far from over, but I had made my move. I turned back before I left, locking eyes with Malcolm. The battle had only just begun. The tension in the air felt like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. Each breath I took pulling me closer to the moment that would change everything. I had spent weeks preparing, both mentally and legally, for this. The legal papers were spread out across my desk, along with the family photographs and old mementos that once filled me with pride. Now, they felt like reminders of what I had lost, or rather, what had been taken from me. I could feel the anger simmering underneath the surface. But there was also something else, something deeper. Determination. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. Not now. Not ever again. Today was the day I would take my life back. The phone rang, breaking my concentration. It was Cynthia, my daughter. "Dad, please," she said, her voice trembling. "You need to think about this. Maybe it's time to let it go for the sake of the family." Her words were meant to soften the blow, to get me to back down. But instead, they pushed me further away from her. She didn't understand. She didn't see the truth of it all. Malcolm wasn't just some kid I could brush off. This was about me, about my dignity, my legacy. "I'll think about it," I said, though the words tasted like acid in my mouth. "I have to go now." I hung up before she could say anything more. What was there left to say? She didn't get it. She never did. I sat back down at the desk, staring at the settlement letter the company had sent me. It was a tempting offer, money in exchange for silence. They wanted me to go away, to forget all of this. But I wasn't going anywhere. Not until they knew what they'd done to me. I tossed the letter aside, my fists clenching. I wasn't some old man they could buy off. They'd made a mistake underestimating me. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The decision was made. There was no turning back now. I reached for the phone and dialed my lawyer's number. "I'm moving forward," I said when he answered. "File the papers. We're taking this to court." The weight that had been pressing on my chest seemed to lighten just a little. The fear, the doubt, it was all fading. There was no time for fear anymore. This was about justice, about proving that I was worth more than the way they treated me. As soon as I hung up, my phone rang again. Malcolm's name flashed across the screen. I knew what this was about. "Harry," his voice came through, slick and condescending. "I've been thinking. Maybe we could work this out. Come meet me. Let's talk this through. For the sake of the family." I felt a rush of anger rise up in me. This man, the one who had fired me so publicly, was now trying to negotiate? No, he didn't get to call the shots anymore. "I'm done with your games, Malcolm," I said, my voice cold. "I'm not going to be your pawn anymore." I ended the call, shaking my head. He thought I was broken, that he could manipulate me. But he didn't know what was coming. I wasn't some old man who could be pushed around. I had more fight left in me than he could ever imagine. The next step was clear. I gathered the legal documents once more and reviewed everything one last time. The case was ready. I wasn't fighting for money. This wasn't about that. It was about proving that I mattered, about showing Malcolm and everyone else that they couldn't just erase my existence. The phone rang again, but this time, it was with a different purpose. The company was already fighting back. The board had filed a counterclaim, saying that my performance had been subpar, that my firing had been justified. The nerve, the audacity. It made my blood boil, but it also ignited something deeper in me. They'd made a mistake. They didn't know what they were dealing with. "I'm not going down without a fight," I muttered to myself, a sense of calm resolve settling over me. I'd been through worse. I'd been knocked down before, but I always came back. And this time, I was coming back with everything I had. The lawsuit was officially filed. The battle lines had been drawn. I wasn't just fighting for my job. I was fighting for the respect I had earned. The respect I had always deserved. The stakes were high, but I wasn't afraid. I knew this fight was going to be long and hard, but it was mine to win. As I moved forward with the lawsuit, the tensions in my family started to escalate. Cynthia was caught between loyalty to her husband and loyalty to her father. She didn't know what to make of my decision, and it showed. She became distant, withdrawn, torn between two worlds that had once seemed so secure. But I couldn't let that stop me. I had given everything for my family. But now, it was time to put myself first. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Cynthia confronted me. Her voice was full of frustration, her face etched with disappointment. "Dad, I don't get it," she said, her words sharp. "Why are you doing this? Why risk everything for what? Personal pride?" Her words cut through me, but I didn't flinch. This wasn't about pride. It was about something bigger. Something they couldn't see. "I'm not doing this for me, Cynthia," I said, my voice steady. "I'm doing this for what's right. You may not understand now, but I'm fighting for something bigger than all of us. I'm fighting for the legacy I've built." She didn't answer, and I knew the rift between us had deepened. But I couldn't stop now. I couldn't back down. The next day, I stood outside the courthouse, the weight of everything pressing down on me. This was it. The first hearing. The beginning of the end, or the end of the beginning, depending on how you looked at it. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I had done everything I could. I had prepared for this moment for so long, and now there was no turning back. As I walked through the courthouse doors, I felt the eyes of everyone on me, the weight of their expectations, their judgment. But I was ready. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. This fight was mine, and I would win. The morning of the trial arrived, heavy with a sense of finality. My hands were clammy as I adjusted my tie in the mirror. It was a habit, this need to present myself well, even when the world felt like it was about to collapse. Today wasn't just another day. It was the day I would face everything I'd been working toward. The culmination of weeks, months, years of frustration. I had spent countless hours poring over legal documents, remembering every little slight, every instance where I had been dismissed or overlooked. The anger that once boiled within me had settled into something sharper, more calculated. I wasn't walking into that courthouse as a broken man. I was walking in as someone ready to take back what was rightfully mine. But there was still a part of me that hesitated. The world wasn't as simple as it seemed. Malcolm, my son-in-law, had been my undoing, but my family was still tangled in this mess. Was it worth it? Was it worth putting everything on the line for my pride? As I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door, the phone rang. It was Cynthia. "Dad, please, can we talk? This is all so much. Please, think about what you're doing." I felt a pang of guilt. She sounded desperate, worried. But it wasn't her worry that weighed on me. It was the realization that she still didn't get it. She still didn't understand how deep this went, how far I had been pushed. "I've made my decision," I said calmly, though my voice felt strained. "This is something I have to do." I hung up before she could argue any further. I wasn't walking into that courtroom for her or anyone else. I was walking in for me, and for the life I built, a life they seemed eager to erase. The drive to the courthouse was a blur. My mind was a tangle of strategy and memories, the sharp sting of betrayal still fresh. I parked my car, sat for a moment, and took a deep breath. This was it. Inside the courthouse, the air was sterile. The people moving around were so focused, so intent on their own business, they didn't know what this trial meant for me. But I knew. This wasn't just about money. This was about proving that I mattered, that I had value, beyond what Malcolm and the company had tried to strip away. As I walked into the courtroom, I saw the familiar faces, the lawyers, the board members, the witnesses, but there was one face I didn't expect to see: Malcolm. He was sitting there, at the table, looking so damn smug. The same man who had fired me, humiliated me in front of everyone, was now trying to look like the picture of confidence. I could feel my blood boiling, the nerve of him. But then something unexpected happened. Malcolm stood up, his voice smooth as he made his way over to me. "Harry," he said, his tone almost warm, like he was offering an olive branch. "I think we can still work something out. You don't have to go through with this. For the family's sake, let's talk." I stood there, frozen for a second. The audacity. He thought I would fall for this? That I could just forgive him and pretend this whole mess never happened? "No reconciliation, Malcolm," I said, my voice steady, but laced with steel. "Not until you're held accountable for what you've done." I didn't give him a chance to respond. I turned and walked away, feeling a cold satisfaction at the shocked expression on his face. Inside the courtroom, I was greeted by the lawyer representing the company, but I hardly noticed. My mind was still focused on the conversation with Malcolm. He didn't get it. He never would. As I took my seat, memories of my years with the company flooded my mind. I thought about all the hours I had spent working late, missing family events, giving everything to make sure the company succeeded. But the more I thought about it, the more it became clear I had sacrificed too much of myself, too much of my family. The trial began, and the tension in the room was palpable. The evidence was laid out, and the case against me was clear. The company's defense was simple. They claimed my performance had been subpar and that my firing was justified. It was an attack on my character, and for a moment I felt the sting. But I quickly reminded myself, this was just the beginning. They were trying to discredit me, but I wasn't going down without a fight. The real shock came when a bombshell was dropped. The company had prepared evidence to counter my lawsuit, using my own past actions against me. They painted me as someone who had been inconsistent, someone whose loyalty had ultimately hurt the company. It was a calculated move to destroy my credibility. For a brief moment, I was stunned. But then, a quiet voice in the back of my mind reminded me, This was part of their plan. They were trying to manipulate the truth. But the truth had a way of coming out, whether they liked it or not. As the trial continued, I could feel the pressure building. The family dynamic, the tension with Cynthia, it was all weighing on me. She had always been loyal to Malcolm, but now I could see the cracks. The disappointment in her eyes when she looked at me was undeniable. But then something changed. After a heated argument with her husband, Cynthia came to me, her voice shaky. "Dad, I don't know what's happening anymore. I feel like I've been blind to everything. I should have supported you more. I'm sorry." For the first time, I saw the person I used to know in her eyes. But it wasn't enough. The damage had been done. We couldn't go back to what we once had. But there was hope, a small flicker. And then, just when things seemed to be going south, an unexpected call came in. It was from a former employee of the company, someone who had been there when everything went down. This person had seen it all, how they manipulated the system to get rid of me. And now, they were willing to testify on my behalf. The weight that had been pressing on my chest suddenly lifted. This was the turning point. This person's testimony could turn the entire case around. I sat back in my chair, feeling the surge of hope that I hadn't felt in weeks. The truth was finally coming to light. The witness took the stand, and with each word, the courtroom grew silent. The company's lies were being exposed, and for the first time in months, I felt like I had the upper hand. The tension in the room was unbearable as the jury deliberated. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I stayed calm. I had done everything I could. The judge called for a recess, and I stood up, glancing over at Malcolm. The smugness had faded from his face, replaced by a look of fear. This was it. The crossroads. The moment where everything would change. The courtroom doors loomed ahead of me like a battleground, and I couldn't help but pause for a moment to gather my thoughts. I was about to walk into the fight of my life, a culmination of everything that had led to this point. The lawsuit, the humiliation, the struggles with my family, all of it had been building up to this moment. Today, I would stand tall, ready to face the consequences, whatever they might be. But despite the resolve that had carried me this far, the weight of everything that had transpired pressed down on me. My stomach churned with a mix of dread and anticipation. The emotional toll had been heavy, not just on me, but on my family. Cynthia, torn between her loyalty to her husband and the truth I was uncovering, still hadn't fully come to terms with the reality of what was happening. I was fighting for justice, yes, but the fight was also for the relationship I had with her, and that was something I wasn't sure I'd ever get back. I took a deep breath and entered the courtroom. It was time to face Malcolm again. As I walked to my seat, I caught sight of him. Malcolm was sitting at the front, looking every bit the smug, arrogant man he had always been. He didn't even glance in my direction until I was standing right in front of him. Then, like a snake in the grass, he made his move. "Harry," he said, his voice oily, "I think we need to talk. Before this goes any further, let's work things out, for the family's sake." I could hear the self-serving tone in his words, the desperation beneath the surface. He wasn't trying to reconcile, he was trying to save his own skin. It was a pathetic attempt at playing the good guy, and it didn't fool me for a second. "I'm done with you, Malcolm," I replied, my voice calm but sharp. "This is bigger than you, bigger than me. You're going to face the consequences for what you've done, and you're going to do it alone." He looked at me with an unreadable expression, but I saw the flicker of fear behind his eyes. He wasn't so confident anymore. The tables had turned. Sitting down, I listened to the court proceedings unfold. My lawyer had done his homework, presenting evidence that was slowly unraveling the company's narrative. Each witness who spoke, each document that was shown, brought me one step closer to victory. But the pressure was mounting. I could feel the eyes of the jury on me, judging not just my actions, but my character. It was clear that they were starting to understand the truth, but there was still a long way to go. As the trial continued, I couldn't ignore the tension from my family. Cynthia, sitting beside her husband, looked torn. Her eyes darted between the testimony and the man she had married. It was hard to watch. She was caught in the middle, but I could see her slowly starting to question everything. The truth had a way of breaking through the lies. Then, in the midst of the battle, the court was hit with a bombshell. One of the former employees of the company, someone I hadn't expected to hear from, stepped up and presented a secret recording. The CEO, the very man who had been behind my firing, was heard mocking me in a private conversation. He had openly plotted my ouster, calling me expendable, all while pretending to support me. The evidence was undeniable. The room fell silent as the tape played. I felt a surge of vindication wash over me. For the first time in months, I felt like the tide was turning in my favor. The jury's eyes shifted, their skepticism replaced with disbelief. They were starting to see the truth, and for the first time, I wasn't alone. Cynthia's face paled as she listened to the recording. The weight of the truth hit her hard, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. She had always been loyal to Malcolm, but the cracks in her marriage were starting to show. I could feel the distance between us growing, but there was still hope. She was starting to see Malcolm for who he really was. During a break in the trial, Cynthia approached me. Her steps were hesitant, her face a mixture of guilt and confusion. "Dad," she began, her voice trembling, "I've been blind. I didn't know how to confront it, but everything feels wrong now. I should have supported you sooner." Her words cut deep, but I didn't show it. Instead, I gave her a steady look. "It's never too late to make the right choice. But this isn't about me anymore, Cynthia. This is about you, finding your own truth." She nodded, but there was a heaviness in the air. I knew this moment wouldn't fix everything. The damage had been done, and the relationship with her husband would never be the same. But it was a step, a small, painful step. As the trial reached its climax, the company's defense began to crumble. The witnesses they had called to discredit me only seemed to solidify my case. With each new piece of evidence, I could see the shift in the courtroom. The company was losing its grip, and I could feel the momentum building in my favor. But then, something unexpected happened. The judge called for a private meeting with my lawyer. The room held its breath. Was this a good sign or a bad one? My pulse quickened. I didn't know what was coming, but I couldn't afford to let it rattle me. I had made it this far. I had fought for everything I believed in, and I wasn't about to back down now. The courtroom fell silent as the jury deliberated. I sat there, alone with my thoughts, reflecting on everything that had led me here. The sacrifices, the pain, the endless nights spent fighting for something that was never guaranteed. The emotional toll was immense. The battle was far from over, but I had done everything I could. And then, just as I prepared for the worst, the jury returned. The verdict was in. The company was ordered to pay restitution, and my name was cleared. A wave of emotion flooded through me, and for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to breathe. The crowd erupted in applause, but I remained calm. I had won, but the victory was bittersweet. As I walked out of the courtroom, the quiet aftermath settled over me. The case was over, but the emotional scars would remain. My relationship with Cynthia was forever changed, and I knew it would take time to rebuild what had been broken. And then, just as I thought I could finally let go, I received a message. It was from a new ally, someone who had been watching the entire battle unfold from the sidelines. This revelation could change everything. The battle wasn't over. Not yet. The courthouse doors slammed shut behind me, but I still felt the weight of everything pressing down. My legs moved mechanically as I walked through the hall, the clamor of the courtroom still ringing in my ears. The trial was over, and for once, I could let go of the constant anxiety that had been gnawing at me for months. The victory was mine, but it didn't feel like a win. The price of this battle was too high. I paused outside for a moment, letting the cold air bite at my skin. My hands were still shaking, and I couldn't shake the image of the jury's faces when they delivered the verdict. The company was going to pay, and my name was cleared. But the relief I had expected was missing, replaced by a deep ache that settled in my chest. The truth was that this fight hadn't just been about the company, or even about me. It had been about my family. And now that the legal victory was behind me, the real battle was only beginning. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked the screen. It was a message from Cynthia, my daughter. I had hoped for this moment, but not like this. The message read, "Dad, we need to talk. Can we meet?" A lump formed in my throat. I had won the fight, but now I had to face the wreckage of everything I had lost in the process. I'd spent my life building a legacy, only to watch it unravel before my eyes. I wasn't sure if I was ready for another confrontation, especially not with her. But I knew I had to go. If there was any hope of fixing what had been broken, it started here. I arrived at the cafe where Cynthia had asked to meet. The place was quiet, the air heavy with unspoken words. I spotted her immediately, sitting alone by the window, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. She looked tired, worn down by the same weight I had carried for so long. When she saw me, her face didn't light up like it used to. It was more like she was bracing for something. I sat down across from her. For a long time, neither of us spoke. I wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. She finally broke the silence. "Dad, I've been thinking. I don't know how to process all this. Everything that came out in the trial, it's not just about you anymore. It's about me, about my marriage. I don't know who to trust anymore." Her voice faltered as she spoke, and I could see the tears welling up in her eyes. My heart twisted at her words. The betrayal, the lies, it had all come crashing down on her too. But this wasn't just about Malcolm anymore. This was about us, and whether we could rebuild what we had lost. "I never wanted you to have to choose, Cynthia," I said, my voice quiet. "I never wanted this. I've always tried to do what was best for you, for all of us. But sometimes, it felt like you and Malcolm were too far gone for me to fix things. You've been caught in a web of his lies for too long." "But you were right, Dad. I've been living in a dream, believing things were okay when they weren't. And now, everything's falling apart." The weight of her words hit me hard, but there was something else in her eyes, a flicker of clarity. She wasn't as lost as she thought she was. "Maybe it's time we face the truth together," I said, taking a deep breath. "I've made mistakes too. I didn't always show up when you needed me the most. And I know that's why you and I have been drifting apart." She nodded slowly, her eyes brimming with tears. The silence between us was thick, but for the first time, it wasn't suffocating. It was the silence of two people finally willing to confront the reality of their relationship. And then, just as I thought we might be getting somewhere, the door to the cafe opened. I turned to see none other than Malcolm standing there, looking uninvited but determined. "Harry, we need to talk," he said, his voice heavy with forced sincerity. My stomach twisted. This wasn't the place, and it sure wasn't the time. But there he was, showing up like nothing had happened, like everything was fine between us. Cynthia's face drained of color as she looked from Malcolm to me. The tension in the air thickened. "Malcolm, what the hell are you doing here?" I asked, my tone cold. "I just wanted to apologize," he said, his eyes darting nervously between me and Cynthia. I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened. I was wrong, Harry. I see that now. I've let greed and power get the better of me. I hurt you, I hurt Cynthia, and I hurt this family. And I'm sorry for that." I stared at him, disbelief washing over me. This wasn't an apology, it was a last-ditch attempt to save himself from the fallout. It was too little, too late. "You've got a funny way of showing remorse, Malcolm," I replied. "Your apology doesn't change what you did. You don't get to walk in here and expect everything to be fine, not after everything you've done." He flinched, but for once, he didn't argue. There was a shift in his eyes, a glimpse of something real, something raw. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. I stood up, my eyes locked on Malcolm's. "If you want redemption, you've got to do more than talk, Malcolm. You've got to show me you can change, and until then, don't bother coming around." With that, I turned to Cynthia. "This is between us now. But understand, I'm not going to stand in your way anymore. You have to decide what you want." She looked torn, caught between the two men in her life. But the pain in her eyes spoke volumes. The road to healing wouldn't be easy, but it had to start somewhere. As I left the cafe, I felt a strange sense of peace. The victory in court had been sweet, but this was something else. Something deeper. I had given Malcolm a chance to prove himself. Not for me, but for the sake of the family. But just as I thought I could start moving on, my phone buzzed again. It was another message, this time from an unexpected source, someone who had been watching the entire ordeal unfold. I opened the message, and my heart stopped. This revelation could change everything once again. I sat in the quiet of my home, the weight of everything still hanging over me. The trial, the betrayal, the long road that had led me here. I could almost hear the echoes of the courtroom, the voices of the lawyers, the sharp sting of the past few months. But now, as I sat alone, the silence felt different. It wasn't peaceful, not exactly, but it was an end of sorts, a relief, even if it came with a bitter aftertaste. The victory in court didn't fix everything. It didn't bring back what I had lost, and the hurt still lingered. The phone in my hand buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. I checked the screen, half expecting to see something mundane. But it wasn't. It was a message from an old friend. I hadn't heard from him in years. "Harry, I've got news. We need to talk. Call me when you can." I felt the knot in my stomach tighten. Another twist, another complication. What now? I dialed his number, and he picked up after the first ring. His voice was low, measured, but I could hear the tension in it. "Harry, it's about Malcolm. He's been making moves behind your back, selling off assets from the company, and that's just the start. There's something bigger going on." "I don't know what, but it doesn't sit right." "You need to know." A cold shiver ran down my spine. I had barely allowed myself to believe I was free of this mess, and now it seemed like the whole thing was about to explode again. Malcolm hadn't stopped. This fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The anger came quickly, sharp and hot. I had fought for justice, fought for the truth to come out. I had won. And now, here he was again, trying to tear everything apart. I clenched my fist, the familiar feeling of betrayal, stinging like a fresh wound. "That son of a..." I muttered under my breath. My mind raced, trying to piece everything together. This wasn't just about the company anymore. It was bigger than that. Malcolm had always had a way of scheming, but now it seemed like he was pulling strings behind closed doors, trying to destroy everything I had worked for. I hung up the phone and sat back, my mind whirling. The weight of this new revelation hit me like a freight train. The calm I had felt earlier was quickly slipping away, replaced by the cold reality that my victory wasn't as complete as I thought. Malcolm had been playing a longer game than I had realized, and now I was caught in it again. I needed to talk to Cynthia. There was no more running from the truth, no more pretending things were okay. The truth was staring me in the face, and it was time to confront it. Time to confront everything. I called her. It rang a few times before she answered, her voice cautious. "Dad?" "Cynthia, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep the tension out of my voice. "It's about Malcolm." I could hear her pause, the weight of the situation settling in between us. "I know, Dad. I know," she said quietly. I could feel the struggle in her voice, the way she was caught between loyalty to her father and loyalty to the man she had married. I had been there. I understood. But now, there was no choice but to face what was happening, whether she was ready or not. We agreed to meet at my place. When she arrived, I saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the same one I had been feeling for so long. We sat down in the living room, the silence heavy between us. "Dad, I don't know what to do anymore," she said, her voice breaking. "I've been so blinded by everything, and now I don't know who to trust." I felt the weight of her words hit me. It wasn't just the company. It wasn't just Malcolm. It was everything. The family I thought I knew, the life I thought I was protecting, it was all crumbling. "You don't have to choose right now," I said, trying to comfort her, even though I didn't know if I believed it. "But you need to understand what's happening. He's trying to destroy everything we've built. He's trying to take what I've worked for." She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I know, Dad, I know, but I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I can." I looked at her, feeling the distance between us. It was hard, so hard, to know where to go from here. But I had to make a decision. I had to keep moving forward, for both of us. "We'll fix this," I said, more to myself than to her. "But first, I need to confront Malcolm. I need to know if he's going to keep tearing this family apart, or if he's going to step up and make things right." There was a long pause. Cynthia's face was full of doubt. "Dad, if you confront him, what happens to us? What happens to me?" I didn't have an answer. Not really. The road ahead wasn't clear. But I knew one thing: I wasn't going to back down. "Not now, not ever. Whatever happens," I said, "I'm doing what's right for the family. You'll have to decide where you stand." She nodded slowly, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I don't know if I can handle any more of this." I understood. I did. But this was the only way forward. For her, for me, for the future. The next day, I called Malcolm. The time had come to face him. No more games, no more lies. We needed to lay everything out on the table. When I walked into the meeting room, my heart was racing, but my mind was clear. This was at the moment where I decided whether to let go of the past or continue fighting. Malcolm was there, sitting across from me. His face was unreadable, but I could see the tension in his eyes. He was ready to defend himself, to justify his actions, but I wasn't having it. "You've made your move, Malcolm," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Now, you're going to answer for it." He didn't try to interrupt me this time. He just sat there, his jaw clenched. "Harry," he said finally, "I did what I thought was best for the company. I was trying to protect it. I never meant to hurt you or your family." The anger flared inside me, but I kept it in check. "That's not what this is about. You didn't just try to protect the company. You tried to destroy everything I built. You tried to tear my family apart." He flinched, but then he did something I hadn't expected. He apologized. For the first time, it felt real. I was wrong, Harry. I see that now. I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of, but I want to make it right. For you, for Cynthia, for all of us. I paused. This wasn't an easy decision, but I knew it had to be made. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about moving forward. I'll give you one last chance, I said, my voice low. You need to come clean about everything you've done, and you need to help rebuild this company not for the money, but for the family. He looked at me, his expression softer now. He nodded. I'll do whatever it takes. The tension in the room started to lift, just a little. This wasn't a victory, not in the way I had imagined, but it was a step forward. It was a chance at redemption, for all of us. As I walked away from the meeting, I felt the weight of the past years lifting, even if just a little. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. The fight wasn't over, but I was done with the past. The door behind me opened, and a familiar face stepped in. Someone I never thought I'd see again. The past wasn't done with me yet,